Hello, everybody, and welcome to this. It's episode 1 now, actually, of At the Basecamp, the classified France 44 podcast from us here at Absolutely Games. I say it's episode 1. We did have episode 0, and we were joined by some of the level design, which doesn't mean you shouldn't go listen to it. You should. I encourage you to go listen to it, but now it's number 1, it's official. And this time we've got some members of art joining us this week. We've got James, who is a level artist. How are you, James?
Hello, I'm good. How you doing, Krispy?
Excellent. I'm quite all right. I'm actually looking forward to today because we're not having a long day today. You know why. As people probably know, it's just before the Christmas break. We're going to get this out before Christmas. But we've got a little Christmas party today, so we're going to be enjoying that. And I don't think Eric's going to be there, who's our other guest, who is the animator. How are you, Eric?
Hi, I'm well, yeah. Not quite sure what to do in the afternoon.
You've got like free time.
Maybe I should just buy myself lunch and sit and look at the ocean.
That sounds just as good, to be honest.
Yeah. That actually. Wait, can we swap? We're having a little conversation today about the artwork that's in France 44. So thank you, gents, for spending some time with me here today. Let's just get into the nitty gritty of it with sort of the first question. What inspired the visual and the visual style and aesthetics of Classified France 44? Obviously, we're set in World War II, so there's going to be historical references. But was there anything else that sort of influenced the art design?
Quite a bit that influenced it. Obviously, like
just a tad.
Just a tad, yeah.
Yeah, I'll leave this one to you, James, because you were there at the start of the development, whereas I just joined throughout it, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely had some input and feedback throughout the process. I think the main visual style at the start we were looking for was to not do as nitty gritty as a lot of like films and TV shows had done it before. So like things like the Band of Brothers, Fury, Saving Private Ryan, were all quite like tonally gritty and a bit like desaturated. So we kind of wanted to do something a bit brighter, a bit more attention grabbing, because like it's 2023, like video games are becoming a lot more colourful and out there. So we kind of wanted to do something like that. So we looked at films like Overlord, where they use really strong sources of colour and light, particularly like oranges and stuff, to get a more vivid picture.
Just to be clear, that's the more up-to-date Overlord, right? There is one from like the 50s.
Oh,
I think.
I think it has zombies in it.
Yeah.
That's really
Full
cool.
disclaimer: we don't have zombies, so
Yet. And then we also we tried to capture like some of the stealth essence of the game. So obviously what's the game called? Classified, yeah.
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. So obviously like Classified is more about like the resistance movement, and it's a very stealthy kind of game. It's got like these back cloak and dagger vibes to it, to kind of reflect the historical moment of it. So I've tried to bring that across in the lighting as well. So our nighttime is quite dark and moody, and it's got this atmospheric fog coming to it, and it's got those really strong points of like light sources and colour in it, just to like have some tie-in with the gameplay and history of it, to show that resistance activities were like done underneath the cover of night, and they're trying to be stealthy and not get caught and stuff. I think that adds like a bit of visual interest to the level as well, and it's kind of that one where the historical accuracy and like the events in the past have like influenced how the process that we're doing things. So, thinking about how and when these missions might have taken place and why they would have taken place, and gone, okay, well, maybe we should influence the visuals to reflect that and kind of tie it together. Makes it feel like a little cohesive vision.
I know I wasn't on the project. You were mentioning like the nitty gritty, but and I think it did get mentioned last episode. People were mentioning like in one of the levels there was a exploded cow carcass at one point, and at some point we realised we were like, no, we're not trying to go that sort of morose or dark and gritty, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there's dark and gritty in the sense of it was a horrific, moment in history, and there were some like truly horrific things to visualize and comprehend, and we didn't quite want to show those because it would be quite heavy. And, it also affects things like age ratings, which is somewhat concerning because if you have an 18 rated game, less people are going to be able to play it and buy it.
Yeah.
I think we did have some darker stuff snuck in at some point, and then when people sort of like, "Oh, I don't think we can do that."
Yeah, I think there was an asset that had, let's say, a body hanging from a tree. I imagine these things did happen in the past. When World War II was happening, and same as using like a farm animal carcass as cover, perhaps. But that's not the sort of tone we were going for. We're not being, as we say with Classified, we're not being 100% historically accurate, but we want to be historically authentic with the game.
That's a great way of putting it.
Were there any other sort of historical references or artistic influences that really helped flesh out the project?
I think the cutscene direction. So we have these animated sketchbooks that kind of show how the story progresses, and they're written out in the style of one of the units that you're playing as. Like they're drawing it and narrating it at the same time.
Our hero character, Willet.
Yeah, the champion.
I'm really happy with that as well. As it does, it's kind of authentic to the period, right? You're not gonna see sketchbooks that are colorful and like super saturated and like incredibly polished. It's gonna be a pencil sketch, and our artist was using Procreate for that, so we were actually able to, go back through the entire animation of the process of the drawing, which is what you see in Classified, right?
Is that how they get the sort of the time lapse effect?
Exactly, that's how you get the time lapse effect. So really, when you are looking at that, you are looking at the person draw. And we made sure to like source artists. Admittedly, this element is outsourced to an illustrator, right? But we managed to find someone that was really good at kind of getting things down accurately on the first draft. So it does look like a really quick and polished pencil drawing. And in
some sort of way, you don't want it to look. You don't want it to look too neat or polished, because it's meant to be like a sketch that's done out in the field.
Exactly. So it's really in like line weight and just the simple shapes and shading, and I think that's done very well. So I'm really happy with that element, and obviously like we said, we wouldn't have a World War II soldier have an oil paint kit around and stuff like that. So,
and there were machines and devices to take photographs, but being a sort of infiltration unit, you want to be as sparse with equipment as possible. Only take the essentials, right? So a pencil and a sketchbook is gonna do it.
Absolutely. Not to say that there aren't. The name's not coming to my mind, but there are some really famous World War II videographers that participated in the landing, and that's exactly the footage that's referenced in films like Saving Private Ryan, and it looks gritty because it's experiencing the moment. And again, that's kind of not what we were going for, right? You're not trying to place the player in that extreme environment.
No, absolutely. So, it's a bit of a strange thing. Like, you've got this historical accuracy that we're pulling from, of like actual references and stuff. But when it comes to putting that into a video game and like creative interpretations, how do you balance this?
With great difficulty. There's a lot of people out there who are like really skilled and understand like specific subjects and areas, particularly with World War Two. Like our lead designer is kind of one of these people who has really great in-depth knowledge about particular areas or particular battles, or like certain insignias and uniforms. And it's like really good to talk with these people and understand what is appropriate, what is accurate. But at the same time, you know, you're creating hundreds of assets, you're creating, you know, tens of levels, and you need to reuse assets to fit them in, you know, because that's how games work. So it's going to be really hard to get this historical, like, I call it authenticity for like one particular thing, but you can kind of be accurate and be like, well, you know, maybe this part isn't actually authentic, but it is accurate to the time period and the battles taking place. So it might not be like 100%, they didn't have that gun at that time in this particular location, but it would be authentic to there were groups of these people using these weapons at that time in that area. And I think it's kind of getting that right balance between being able to do that and like knowing where to go, okay, this is a key moment that does need to be more authentic, and kind of putting in the effort there and the time there. I think there's one as well, like we earlier on in the project we had a lot smaller levels that were like really authentic. So buildings and houses that had like 2x2 cell toilets, essentially. Cause yeah. Toilets were like small, so it's a small little room where you could enter. There'd be a toilet in there, but there'd be like no gameplay impact of it.
Yeah.
You could take cover there, but there'd be no window to shoot out of. There'd be no enemy.
The best cover, but you know, smells a bit.
Yeah. There's a few details actually where we put like flies around these like outhouses and stuff. Get that across. But it's kind of like figuring out spaces like that which make sense and they're like accurate and they feel right, but then they're not fun to play. So it's like, well, let's kind of enhance those areas so they're a bit more fun to play. You know, maybe we'll knock down a wall or a door into that toilet to open up a space, and then like you can have these gameplay battles around it that feel good, and also it makes sense. You know, it's still accurate. It might not be authentic. You know, people didn't go blowing up toilet walls sort of for whatever reason, but it feels better to play. And I think getting that balance is really hard, and that's something when, you know, design and art work together, they could really put their heads together and get around it.
It is one of those things I always say on most projects that I work on, like the recent few that I've worked on have been like military games. So like you say, there's people out there who really know their stuff, and they'll tell you when something's wrong. But when you're working in video games, you do have to tell people at some point, it's like the game part comes first. Like, we want you to have fun. Like, of course, we want things to look as well as possible and play as well as possible. But, you know, sticking a toilet in a turn-based tactical game where there's not much movement and stuff, as a player, I'd probably end up there and then go, why have they put this in here? Like, this doesn't help me. So yeah, it's good to be mindful of the things where you're like, yes, that would be the real way to do it, but now we're adjusting some things. So there's gameplay fun and benefit there, and then a player just won't even think that sort of thought, right? They'll go in there and be like, right, I can take this shot, and they're just busy playing the game rather than ending up somewhere and going, why did they put this here? It's like taking a corridor in another action game or something, and there's no treasure at the end. You're like, you gave me a choice of a corridor, and you put no treasure at the end of one corridor. Why did you do this?
Yeah.
Whereas if there is treasure, if someone finds it, they go, great, awesome, move on. Sorry, a little bit of a tangent there.
It's right, and I think looking at other games, like if you have a first-person shooter, you can kind of have those periods or moments where there's no gameplay, but you're walking around and experiencing it, and that works really well. But when you're having a top-down game, you don't really get a chance for those moments because it's just there's not anything there, there's no gameplay. It's just experiencing it, but you can experience it anyway because you've got a bird's eye view of this game. So it's turn-based, so you can take your time and go look at things. You don't need to like force players into a situation.
And I guess with turn-based games, you're consistently interacting with new elements of things that are appearing, and everything's always kind of updating, right? Whereas,
yeah,
you know, a FPS or an open world game, they sort of have quotas of interaction often, where you need to like have a new world event or thing every 20 seconds or even less so with many other titles. But I think that's a good average number, and I don't think that's really a thing in the turn-based genre. It's just you can't it's consistently there, so you don't want to have those dead ends, I guess.
I think that was something that came up recently in that Half-Life Valve documentary that came out. They had a sort of metric where they were like, we want someone to be like bumping into something environmental, whether it's voice line or like a poster on the wall, sort of at least every minute or less, to keep people engaged and going across that level.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we don't have that in turn-based games as much. Like you say, you react to things that happen within the game. So a new wave coming in, you then reassess your plans and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As we're talking, Eric, I did have down as a question, tell us more about the mocap sessions. Now, we'll talk about the official mocap session. The reason I put this in, though, is I wanted to you to tell us more about you doing some of the mocap sessions.
The in-home.
I think it was some pickups at home, yes. Because we saw, I want to try and source the picture of you in the suit and attach it in this podcast.
I'll have to look. I recently cleared all my desktop folders, like my temp folders.
Oh no! It'll have to be on the cloud. We'll find it in the Discord. But yeah, if you can tell us about the mocap sessions and getting those animations for the game.
Yeah, I mean, so overall, we're doing humanoid animations. So obviously, in World War II with soldiers. But I guess how do I put it? Like we needed a solution that allowed us to quickly make pickup motion capture sessions happen, and just get those animations into the title without having to book a larger studio and hire actors and plan everything out, because we were in the late stages of development. You sort of find cracks in the animation state machine, and you need to fill them in. And that, besides also abilities that weren't entirely implemented yet, there were things that were still planned and we just didn't get to yet. But yeah, overall it was us utilizing the Rococo motion capture suit, which is essentially the most modern inertial motion capture system that's recently released. It's kind of monopolized, not monopolized, the opposite of that. Allowed the lower budget side of game development access to motion capture.
A better entry point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The barrier of entry has been lowered, and that's great. And the company's honestly a really interesting startup. They just wanted to make games originally, and then they kind of found out that they could monetize their product and allow other people to make games. So that's been their focus. So I really like the company personally. But in terms of that, it's essentially me wearing a motion capture suit in my room and doing a lot of these actions. So I think a lot of what I was kind of having to do with was locomotion, cover stuff, and a lot of the Basecamp elements that you can see in the Basecamp.
In the Basecamp. Just I'll clarify for people who are listening. What Eric's talking about is in the Basecamp. If you take certain units out into the battle and they get wounded or they suffer morale damage, they'll reflect that in their sort of their animations and their movements. So you're aware of who's sort of struggling and who needs to rest and stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So you have a variety of different postures, let's call it, and essentially, I would you want to have multiple character display the same emotion, so that multiplies the amount of animations that you need to have per emotion or state. and so yeah, a lot of that stuff with characters sitting in the menu, in the base camp and acting out is me. A lot of it is, I think there's some remnants of the larger shoots. I think that's probably all the sat positions are from the Creative Assembly studio shoot, which used optical mocap. But I think, I think it would be more interesting to kind of get into what I'm sort of up to when I'm recording the data, which is holding Nerf guns and sort of collapsing in place, which it's quite fun. So there's obviously we need props that we can use, and I found out that in the testing of the process, essentially we have all these different Nerf weapons that I essentially have an armory of Nerf weapons at this point, and but via testing, we kind of I realized that the shotgun is probably the best solution for what I was doing, as it allowed me to hold my hands in very specific positions, and these are just weird things that you find out for the specific pipeline that you're working on at the time. So this wouldn't be true for any other project. Like it's just like with how our characters are built and what I need to get done with the animation, as in have this animation kind of be compatible with many other weapon types. The shotgun ended up being the thing that I was using all the time. And
that's mainly because of the hand placement, I guess.
It's because of the hand placement. It gives you a good amount of elbow outward pointing, so
jutting.
Exactly. And that kind of it allows you to retarget data a bit easier, because often with those kind of things you would have the elbow start clipping through the chest. If you have a weapon that's quite tight to the body, suddenly you have a weapon that's much larger and you're using that same animation, and it just kind of breaks the character. So these are things you have to look out for when you're capturing the data that needs to be retargeted to many different scenarios, or not retargeted but applied to. I was using that term wrong there. But essentially, speaking of that, what we would do then is export that and retarget that onto our various characters, and we'd also have a male and female animation set, as the anatomy slightly differs and the character models wouldn't display perfectly if they played the same animation. So at that point I would ideally you hire a female actor, but there is a sort of middle ground where you can get similar results by just adjusting the posture and trying to make the character just look more natural and relaxed in their actions. We beyond that, it's essentially just implementing those animations into the game. And I think James and I worked together on making the mission intro cutscenes. That's what we call them, right?
Where your units are walking into the battle, or the field of play. Let's call it.
I think that most of that's still old mocap data. Well, not old mocap, not mocap data from my own shoots. Considering there's a large amount of locomotion there,
they were a bit different, weren't they? Because most of our animation in game is based on a 1x1 meter cell.
Yeah.
Whereas we had a bit more freedom with these to actually have them walk forward into the field of battle.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say that's something about my work that's quite compatible with the sort of requirements by the game. Considering I work from home and I do all this motion capture here, it's actually quite beneficial that you're sort of limited by the 1x1 cell with the mocap, because obviously then there's no scenario where I have to book out a studio and sort of have more space. Yeah.
To be completely honest, I hadn't even thought of the restrictions of being like restricted to a 1x1 cell, and like the animations that you can do within that. And you guys just saying it, I was like, oh yeah, I bet that's like a unique challenge to face. Whereas in other things, animations, you want them to be as explosive as possible and like
absolutely. I mean,
be seen.
A really good example of this is our death animations. To get around, you know, characters sort of dying and falling into environment and clipping through it, because our death animations are keyframed, they're not ragdolled. I would essentially have to mocap myself collapsing in a 1x1 square. And that looks really funny on video, but once you mix it and animate into it, as in like once you blend it with another animation, for example, sort of like a state at the start that you, like an idle that you blend out of, for example, or like just like these things were quite funny to record overall in this 1x1 square, because it was really difficult to collapse that way. I'd sort of have to like crawl up into a ball immediately, which is not how you intend on falling.
Most people die.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. I don't. That's the thing. Like, you're not really. I presume that if you obviously you're out in battle, you're not really going to be conscious of where your head lands. But that's something I need to be aware of in order to record the next animation. So it kind of it's balancing that, being able to collapse without any exact sheltering yourself essentially in your drop.
As Buzz Lightyear would say, falling with style.
Yeah, exactly. Falling with style is a good way of putting it. So that's kind of a good overall view of, I think, what I'm up to with the project. I'm trying to think of other elements of the in-home part, but maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, is there? I didn't have a question ready for you on this one, but is there some way you come across some challenges? Like I know we had some builds where some animations were playing a bit faster than you'd expect, like vaulting through windows, or when we do the enemy patrols and people were like, oh, this looks kind of funny. What was the way to sort of get through those challenges?
I think like most things in game development, it's really just iteration. With the if a walk cycle doesn't look the way that we really intend it on looking, then you either adjust the animation or you replace it entirely. I think we went for the second option with that. There's just things like motion capture, for example. It's difficult to get cycles, and I'll translate that for the non-animator, as in looping animations, into through motion capture. It's difficult to get cycle animations, essentially. And
whereas keyframes, when you're animating it by hand, it's much easier, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I would assume.
You can control the poses. You can make sure that something ends up exactly where it starts. Whereas with motion capture, you're recording reality, and it's never going to be the same. There's just no scenario where an actor would ever hit the exact same pose. So you sort of have to. There's definitely an element of like animating the motion capture into a cycle, and often that doesn't look as great. So what we had to do was essentially just hand animate those kinds of animations. And in terms of what was the other thing that you mentioned? That was another good example. We talked about the walk cycle, and we talked about
was it vaulting?
Oh,
through
vaulting.
Windows?
So,
yeah.
Exactly. With locomotion stuff in our title, there's a lot of separate animations because it's again like a turn-based game. So you essentially have something happening from one square into the next square, or you have something happening in that square. And when you combine these things in the movement code, and I can't speak for code, so I won't try to get too specific, but essentially, yeah, you have a lot of stopping moments where the character will return to like a beginning pose. And so really I would say that speeding those things up is just a case of kind of creating a state machine that blends between those states fluidly. And we just hadn't addressed that yet when we were looking at that at the time. We just sort of didn't dedicate enough time to it really. But once it got the attention it needed, you know, it was easy to solve. At least apparently easy to solve. You know, I didn't make the solution. Again, it was like a programmer. What do you call it? Nav meshing kind of situation. Which, I'm not too involved in. But I'd say it's really down to just having state machines that enable your characters to kind of vault quickly, rather than pausing and then vaulting and then dropping down, and then stopping for a moment and returning to their pose and then starting to walk. There's a lot of that. There's also a lot of trying to fill in like the gaps, because obviously in modern game development you sort of rely on blending animations, whereas, you know, back in the days where blending wasn't really a thing, you'd have to start an animation on the same key that you had ended it with the previous one. So the state machines, you know, for like games, I'm just making examples of an era, but like games like Spyro and so on, you would have an animation always start with the frame of the previous one and end on something and then transition, and you'd have those transition animations animated as well. And we kind of it's not great that transition animations are kind of lost, but we don't really need them. So often you will have bugs where you sort of realize that we might need an extra transition animation somewhere, and then you sort of have to record that with motion capture and account for the the first pose and the last pose and try to get something similar, and then sort of edit that animation so it can actually make that blend happen. And then you test it and just hope for the best. Try to, you know, adjust the results, kind of hone it in a bit more. But that's essentially a good breakdown of that process of speeding up things or making things more fluid. It's just iteration and adding to things, really.
That was fantastic. Because I know it was definitely one of those things you kept on having to do tweaks on, because it changed and people were like, no, it's too quick, or it's too slow now. And
very early on in development, animations were a lot kind of slower. They're very like realistic, like units like really being sneaky and sneaking around, and we just found it was taking too long. You know, you would sit there waiting seconds for people to move around. It wasn't very fun. So there was a lot of like speeding up these animations, but also making them still feel realistic, which I think Eric has done really well. Got that good balance of.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a risk that you have when you speed up and slow down animations. You just kind of lose the weight of the character, or like, obviously there's a center of mass, and that varies based on the inertial mass. Inertial. I'm messing up my physics terms, but essentially,
it's a good thing you're not a physicist.
Yeah, exactly. The mass kind of has a trajectory, and if that isn't reflected by the balance of the character, or they look like they're about to fall over, but then they don't, that just turns into really bad movement. It looks uncanny. Looks not natural, and so when you speed up animations, you sort of you might have like a range of 20 20% up or down, where it looks good. I mean, this is for specific animations. I guess with other things it wouldn't be the same, but as in the values I'm mentioning. But anyway, if you go beyond those values, you're gonna create really unnatural behaviors, and yeah, you don't want to do that. So sometimes if you want to speed something up, this goes back to the walk cycle. You'll just have to replace the animation to make it faster, rather than having the slow kind of pacing walk turn into.
Because then, the tempo's all off, or the gait and stuff.
I mean, if you've ever seen those walkers, like on roads, like people that kind of walk for sport, and the whole
power walking.
Yeah, power
and
walking.
They do it.
I think the purpose is that the heels are always, like, you always have a heel contacting with the floor. There's never a point where you don't have a foot contacting the floor. And that's kind of how it looks when you speed up a walk animation, whereas run animations, or I guess because we're talking about actual behaviors, run actions, will have about 20% airtime, something like that. I'd have to refer to my 9 Old Men Disney animation book to get the exact number for that, but it's something like that.
But when you're running, there is a moment, I know this from when I did GCSE PE, and there's a moment both feet are off the floor.
Yeah, exactly. Just before you're about to make the next step, there's like a slight jump. So really, running is jumping with catching yourself and jumping again.
Get deep here with the philosophy.
We're always leaping into a risk.
But I know completely what you mean about certain walk animations or run animations can, if they get uncanny. I won't mention the name of the game, but I played something recently, and I can tell the character is going to end up in a big sort of machine exoskeleton suit because of the way they're walking without that suit on. The animation currently is as if they are wearing that suit, so it's big and cumbersome. And it completely drew me out of what I was playing, because I was like, why are they walking like this when they're just in normal garment?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that goes back into the posture thing as well. Like, you just, the weight of a character is really important, and it's those elements that kind of make that weight, I guess, like create that identity, like that character itself. The way someone walks is the character's. Their character. Essentially.
Sort of, if you saw a silhouette of them walking, you kind of want to figure out who's
exactly.
that Pokemon.
Yeah, I think Team Fortress 2 has a really famous video where they kind of silhouette the characters for the walk cycles, and you can immediately tell who's who. That's the same thing, really.
Have you seen Peaky Blinders?
Yeah.
I have not. I've heard it's good. I have been meaning to watch it, but it's one of those, I've got to sit down and watch the whole thing now.
There's a guy in it called Arthur, and he has this very unique walk where he's got like both his arms out and he spins them backwards and forwards, and he shrugs his shoulders. He's got like a bit of swagger to him, and it's basically like it's his walk, it's his signature move, and it's like you can tell it's that person just from the way they walk.
It says a lot about a person.
It does, yeah. And it's when you're like trying to animate those for a game, it's like getting that personality across through the animation is really important.
We've talked quite a bit about sort of our hero characters and like the characters you'll see in the base camp, but obviously we have enemies, and we have members of French resistance as well. They're not the enemies, but we'll recruit them as allies within the game. Was anything done in sort of the animation or art department to distinguish them?
The enemies from...
Yeah, the enemies in the French resistance, is there anything different about them compared to, say, our OSS, SAS characters?
I think mostly as a serious answer, the characters share the movement for most of the stuff. So like the animations are shared between the male character and the enemy soldiers. We don't have female enemy soldiers, I think.
No.
Yeah, so that's basically the same. The only thing that our characters don't do is patrol, and the enemy soldiers do patrol. So that's the only animation really that they have. Besides, obviously, all of our abilities aren't represented in the enemy character. So I guess that's kind of what we do focus on. You know, making a morale animation look positive, and you know the enemy's not going to have a morale animation at all. So when we're doing that, we're focusing on like the Western sort of allied spirit, in a sense. It's kind of arbitrary in that sense. Like when you're recording the animations, you kind of just imagine, you know, a scenario or a character that you're trying to be in that moment, and then you act it out as them. You try to, you know, again, get their posture and, you know, feel of how they behave. So I'd say that goes into a lot of the ability animations, but like overall, the rest of it's shared when it comes to locomotion and aiming and firing, etc.
There are some kind of sequences where we stitch together these ability animations that are unique for enemies. So like, I think when they come out of patrol and they spot you, I think they like put an arm forward and they do a shout to alert everyone. I think that's kind of unique in that your units would never do that, essentially. So you get these unique little situations, and then when you get the audio on top of it, so you get the German shouts, it kind of ties it all together, and it makes it feel really unique and different compared to the Allied ones.
I will say, when we took the game to Gamescom, we had a lovely fellow. I'll remember his name in a second. I'm on the spot here, but he was helping us demo the game. He goes to Gamescom all the time, and when he was playing it, he was like, "Oh, I love it that even though I've changed the language to German, the heroes still talk in like their authentic language, and the enemies talk in their authentic language." And he was like, "It just helps me get into the headspace." Yeah. Let's say. So yeah, with those sort of animations and the barks on top, yeah, it's one of those things to draw people in, I'd say.
Luckily, I think the enemy soldiers speak in native language is an options in the options menu, and I think it never used to be defaulted on, and then we defaulted it on, and it was just like immediately
like, oh yeah, this is much better.
Yeah. You still get subtitles for it, so it's not like you...
You're just reminding me of Inglourious Bastards having like 4 languages or something.
Another little aside, we've gone into audio and no one's audio here, but yes, I've been also learning German as well, and then recently I went and played Call of Duty 2 because it was on a deep sale. And it really, the horrors of war hit me a bit more than I expected, because I could kind of understand the German call-outs that were happening. So they'd be like, "Da drüben," as in over there, for when I was like coming into a scene. And then one time I shot someone, and all I heard is, "Mein Freunde." So someone was exclaiming, "My friend," after I'd shot them. And I was like, oh, I can't take this. This is psychological warfare coming at me.
Jesus.
Just a little aside, I thought I'd throw in there.
They're all just soldiers in the end, aren't they?
Exactly. The people who send people off to war aren't the ones doing the war. Yeah. Right. We'll wrap up with that sort of with a sort of final question. Merry Christmas, everyone. So, what are some of your favourite things to be been to work on Classified? Anything in particular that really stuck out where you were like, man, this was really fun to work on?
I mean, you go ahead, James.
No, I think for me, probably some of the VFX and destruction sequences. It's something I hadn't really done much of before, like professionally. So it's like really fun to figure out how they work and get stuck into them. One with the BF 109 blows up, I think it's my favourite. like rigged and animated it, and like the wind flaps and the body twist and contort as it blows up. It looks really like fluid and polished, and you don't really notice. Like normally when you blow up things, you swap it out for a different mesh, and you cover it up with like a puff of smoke or something.
Yeah.
And I feel like with that one, you don't really notice it that much because it's well animated, it's in sync. And there's like a few challenges with that as well. Like we have these dead shapes that stay on the ground afterwards. So when you blow up a vehicle, you get the dead carcass of a vehicle that still takes up that space. So you kind of have to figure out, well, I need to blow this up, but it also needs to remain in the same footprint and look like it still blocks navigation and stuff.
Yeah.
So kind of like figuring that out and getting that to feel right was definitely a challenge, but it was quite a fun challenge. And with BF-109, it's a very unique shape, so getting that flop and twist and it sits back down and you can't navigate around it felt really good for me. And you get loads of screen shake, which is...
That does sound super rewarding.
Yeah.
I'd say on my end, I would definitely refer to motion capture direction in particular. So...
and getting an armory of Nerf guns sounds pretty good as
armory
well.
of Nerf guns, I really don't... I'll be honest, I don't know where to store them, but we'll figure that out. But right now they're just in a box in like...
Oh, I'm just imagining that scene from Hot Fuzz, like the cops come and raid Eric's house and open double doors, and there's just this armory of Nerf guns hanging off walls.
What I do have hanging off walls are instruments, so it's similar, but there's like a lot of instruments in the house. It gets a bit confusing. Especially the person I live with has 2 guitars that I have as well. So sometimes we really struggle. We grab the wrong thing by accident.
That's my axe.
Exactly. My fault. But no, I think in terms of the most rewarding thing, and obviously playing with things is like the Nerf guns and so on. I just kind of like watching the actors more than doing it myself, if I'm honest. There's a lot more I don't know, it's just more stimulating to me as work to sort of be able to direct something and try to push for an outcome. When you're capturing yourself, you're focused on a lot of minor things like where am I pointing my shoulder, or like where's my knee, and it does kind of like fog up your holistic view of the animation, and that's a lot easier to do when you're directing someone else. Yeah. So that's honestly the most rewarding element. I love it. I love kind of also just the fact that you get to collaborate with actors and sort of have
they're taking your direction and giving their artistic interpretation on that.
And besides that, it's also really interesting to see how they work. Like, I mean, fortunately, because we're in England, a lot of the actors that you tend to work with are theatre actors. So you get a lot of big performances that you need to read from far away, which is really good for us. And I mean, I'm not a trained actor, so I don't think that I would really be able to match that kind of performance. Even as much as I try, and I guess the audience will have to tell me in the end. But yeah, I think that it's just a really rewarding experience to kind of get a good result after collaborating and chatting to people and just honestly having a good time doing it as well. It's just really fun.
No, it sounds fantastic. Well, with all that said, thank you again, gentlemen, for being here. We'll start wrapping up, as I think I've got a meeting I'm going to be having to go into and stuff. But just want to say thank you for being here. I hope you both enjoyed the winter break or Christmas break, however you're spending it. Anyone doing anything fun that they might want to share?
Travelling with family, really.
Travelling and family.
Christmas as well.
Same.
The whole deal.
I have to leave the country, and I think my whole family's caught COVID at the moment.
Oh, no!
So I have to it's good. It's a good timing, because when I'm there, they're gonna have recovered
You got the time
by
off?
then.
Okay,
But
okay.
I'm just worried I'm gonna catch it. So essentially, I'm just gonna stay at home and do the typical Christmas thing of just drinking a lot of wine with family.
Nice.
Hide from the general public.
It's too cold out there.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Yeah, I'm going to be heading off to Berlin shortly, just a little weekend break. Enjoy the Christmas markets and stuff. But everyone else out there who's listening, I recommend you do something fun for yourself over the Christmas or winter breaks, whether it is spending time with friends and family, or, hey, it might be spend 10 hours one day just playing the game that you wanted to sit down and play. This is the time to have fun and celebrate however you wish. I think so. From Absolutely Games, thank you very much. Have a great Christmas. If you're really interested in Classified France 44, I'd recommend adding it to your Steam wishlist and following us on all the social platforms. Chucking us questions if you have any questions for the next episode of At the Basecamp. You could do that through Spotify. And while you're there, chuck us a 5-star review. We might even read it out. How about that? Anything you guys want to add?
Well, have a good holiday. Hope you play the game. Hope you enjoy the game.
So do I, yeah. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for having us, Crispy.
No worries. All right. Bye.
Wait.